Yeah.
Leave it on the. You can leave it on the floor now.
I know you do that.
Um,
I'm just gonna leave it like this for now. It's okay.
yeah.
And then
Is it on?
yeah. No one's joined yet. I haven't shared the link with anyone.
Okay. You know, it's supposed to say it's in this video. It's supposed to say it's in this video. Okay. Yeah, no. Is this audible like if I speak into the mic?
Should be.
Test.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, cool.
No,
Yeah, wait. You're fine. So
for now, you want to address welcome to the Rumble.
no, I know.
Okay, sure. Yes, let's start with that, and then you'll go in opening government.
All right. Hi, everyone. Cool. So, welcome everyone to the final of Jozi Rumble 2026. I'm really glad that we're here after a really long tournament with some really great rounds and some really great motions, and I can't wait for the final here tonight. So, without further ado, we're going to start, and we're going to start by me calling in the teams, and I'm going to call them all in individually, and what's going to happen is we're going to play like their team theme song, right? Cool. So, the first team we're calling in is Opening Government, TNZ, Teddy and Zuzi. Give it some time. The second team in this final is Scaring the Hose, Ria and Stembiesel in opening. The team in closing government is Mole Slay, Layla, and Molemo. And last but not least, the team in closing opposition, UCT Nina and the Neuron. That's Nina. Yeah. All right, cool. Before we begin, I'm just going to read the info slide to the final, and then I'm going to read the motion. The info slide reads, Divine hiddenness states that God remains silent or unseen, even to those who sincerely seek them. Divine intervention states that when God actively shows their presence in human life, such as through guidance, miracles, etc., in short, hiddenness emphasizes God's apparent absence, while intervention emphasizes their active presence. The motion for Jozi Rumble 2026 reads, this house prefers a dominant norm of divine hiddenness rather than divine intervention.
That's fine, not yet. Announce the panel.
Finally, we're going to announce the panel for this final. Firstly, I'm going to start with the chair, that is Tepelo Leo Kwana. In the panel, they're joined by Aisha, Alex Manisa, Jabulani Boloi, and Sino Malose. Without further ado, we're going to start with this final.
funny. My preferred pronouns are they, them. I'm going to be a chef for this round. Can you please order if you agree with anything that the speaker say? Kindly just wave your hands and not bend the table so that we are able to hear the content that will be given to us. Thank you so much. Without any further ado, I would like to call upon Prime Minister to come and defend the motion beforehand.
For my hair. Sorry, I have so many papers, even from last round. Am I audible? Nope. Am I audible? Okay. I'm assuming we're allowed to give shout outs, right?
Yeah.
Who's saying, who from Okom is saying yes? Okay, I can't see. Okay, I don't know if this mic actually works. Does it work?
Yes.
Before I make my... Okay, does it work? Okay. I initially wanted to start my shout out by reassuring everyone who participated in smear campaigns against me that I will not be calling them out again, because I realize how annoying it must be to have your actions against me reach yet another final before your arguments do. Then I had to...
Reach the government.
Then I had to reprimand myself because that statement is unkind, not because they don't deserve it, but because I simply don't want to be remembered for saying that. I want to be remembered for how I kept my character in the face of insincerity and adversity, because that is something I've always asked God for. That I not be so angry that I build an altar around my pain, that I not allow what happened to me to change me. I was consumed by anger for the longest time because it is so easy to be angry, but I decided that I will forego my right to punish them every chance I get. And I have a history of making finals. It would have been a hell of a tenure, right, for them. This doesn't mean that I will reconcile with them, because what they did, I guess, told me everything I need to know about their character. And as the kids say, it just means that I'm choosing to exist outside of what happened to me. A lot of people come to JR, a lot of people came to this JR specifically to teach people lessons, to settle scores, to remind some of us of who they are. But the JR audience keeps getting smaller with every JR that we have. And this is because people keep treating JR like a metaphorical, like boxing ring. This is true for all other tournaments too, because yes, COVID-19 weakened the Southern African debating circuit, but we also have to take responsibility for our part in ruling the circuit. The social politicization of the space, the psychological power placed in rooms, the disingenuous engaging of each other's cases are insane. Debating is inherently an underwarding sport because it is expensive. There's only one winner. There's only one best speaker. Very underwarding. The thing that makes it rewarding is all of us in this room. We have to do better to make this space safe. It is our responsibility because we want to continue to exist in it. Shout out to everyone. I told you guys I worked on it. Okay. I don't know how I'm gonna put my notes down and like still use the mic. I hope I'm still audible even when I'm far away from it. Okay. Three, two, one. Let's establish what is true in this debate on both sides. We think that God exists on both sides. The difference is how we're going to perceive the existence of God. This is important because we don't want people telling us about Nietzsche and everything else about how religion is dying. We have to engage this motion genuinely. Let's get into some characterization. Let's talk about what we think the dominant norm is likely to look like. We think it is going to be the primary way of us perceiving and interpreting God's existence. This means then that churches and people are likely to see God as someone that is divinely hidden, right? This means then that even religious institutions are going to create interpretations around God existing this way. What do we mean when we talk about divine hiddenness and divine interpretation? Let's talk about divine hiddenness. I think it is important for us to understand that this is not the absence of God. We just assume that he's not seen by our own eyes, by our own like human experiences. This means that our access to God is not confirmed by things that are tangible, by things that are material. Secondly, then it means that we always assume that we are incapable of fathoming his existence, of fathoming his work, of fathoming his mind, meaning we don't try to understand it anyway. What does divine interpretation look like? We think two things. It looks like always seeking confirmation about God from our human and lived experiences. So we look to miracles, we look to things looking good, we look to things like the bus leaving a minute later just because you were running late, right? Secondly, then it looks like living your life in a way that allows you to seek him consistently because you are under the impression that you can find him. Let's get into why we're having this debate. It's important for us to understand that existence is fundamentally oppressive. We don't choose to be born. We don't choose how we're going to live in this world. We don't choose how we exist in society. Our first attempt at responding to the imposition of existence was the establishment of a God. Religion, the existence of God, is what provides us comfort when we're navigating this imposition that is existence. It tells us we're not alone. It tells us that as human beings we're seen. It tells us that as human beings we are protected. Skepticism, however, is very innate in our humanity. So we are consistently questioning whether he exists, and therefore we want to know how we're able to confirm his existence, and so we create matrix to confirm that. This means then that we tend, so far in status quo, we tend to attribute that which is good, that which is miraculous, that which we can't understand but we positively perceive to God. What is our criteria for why we prefer this to be the dominant norm in the world? Two things. Firstly, when it is able to provide all of us with a sense of meaning, but secondly, when it is good for society outside of like divinity. Let's get into some argumentation. I think it's important for us to understand that when you have this as a dominant norm, it removes structural barriers to accessing God. And I'm going to urge everyone to walk with me slowly. It's important for us to realize that intervention, meaning divine intervention, has created intervention measurements that are arbitrary. I say they're arbitrary because they're quite random. There is no certainty around how intervention exists. We just assume that the goodness that the religious institution has attributed to this is like the way in which we confirm it, right? So the closest we've gotten to this interpretation is that miracles are from God, that which is good is from God, right? So when you have divine hiddenness, what do you have? You remove the structural barrier of confirming God's existence. Why do I say the structural barrier? Because we confirm God through materiality, through tangibility, through the human experience, that which is physical with us. It means things like being born into wealth affirm that God loves you. It looks like French people coming to like small African countries and saying that they feel so blessed that, you know, that they were born white or that they didn't sin in a previous life or whatever. It looks like you being grateful that you haven't experienced oppression. It looks like you assuming that things are consistently working out for the good and attributing that to the confirmation of God's existence. It is good because when we remove the structural barrier to access God, we remove the idea that goodness is the precondition to confirm God's existence. This means then that we challenge the idea that God only exists when things are good. When God only exists when things are good. This is because with the divine hiddenness, we assume his existence, his presence, his might is continuous. It exists all the time. We say say God is good all the time, and all the time God is good. We don't need physical conditions of our life tell us whether he exists or not. We treat his existence as a dogma, as a truth that we simply just have. Why must it be a dominant norm? It must be a dominant norm to challenge how we currently perceive and interpret God's existence. The current way in which we interpret God's existence is that goodness is always associated with him. Even when things are bad and they happen to us, we truly hope that there's going to be something good out of this. We truly hope there's going to be a lesson attached to this that is going to lead to something to something greater. Before I get into my impacts, I'll take Rhea.
So far, Teddy is entirely uncomparative. If being born into wealth tells you that God loves you, surely being born out of wealth will tell you that he hates you.
Rhea, if you would let me finish. Okay, please let me finish because that is silly, okay? The impact here, we're able to make the comforts around, two impacts here. First one is that we're able to change how we perceive the value of existence. Many of us want existence to be good, to be grand, to matter. Many of us want the actualization of our existence to still be defined within values of capitalism. So if you are rich, then something was good. When we have this as a dominant narrative, and this engages Rhea's POIs, even if you don't become a CEO, even if you don't cure cancer, for instance, Tembiso, even if you don't become like the CEO of anything greater, you think your existence on its own is confirmation that God is good, then there doesn't need to be anything else attached to your existence and your contribution to the world that confirms that. Secondly, then, we're able to make the comforts around the existence of a God accessible to everyone, even those who want to exist outside of the institutionalization of religion. Currently, the only way in which you are consistently validated and you are able to seek affirmations that this God exists is through what religious authority, like your pastor, who tells you, oh, wow, you gave a tithe, definitely you are blessed, definitely God is good. However, when you have this as a dominant narrative, even if you want to exist outside of religious institutions, your mere existence, wherever you are, regardless of whether you want to engage with a church, regardless of whether you want to participate in the rituals that are associated with religious institutions, you think he's looking over you, you think he's always on your side, you think you are not alone. We think then that we're able to engage, we're able to prove to you why our criteria for measuring why this ought to be a dominant narrative gets to be met at the point where we're able to prove to you that we think humanity, at the point where existence is fundamentally oppressive, we ought to create ways in which people are able to ascribe meaning to their lives without relying on material things. Proud to win from OG.
Thank you for that fine speech. I'll now have to put up with the opposition for
Can anyone hear me? Yeah. Okay, super, thanks. Okay, hi everyone, my name is Rhea. No preferred pronouns, and please just raise your hand for the POI situation. I'm going to do a couple of shout outs before I start. First of all, shout out to someone with the line who really should have been in this final, my Jozis and besties. Shout out to everyone that is working really hard to make this space more accepting, and screw you to everybody that's not. You suck, and you're also not in the final. Yeah, man, that's really all I have to say. Shut up. Okay, I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Perhaps one of the most riveting and exciting moments in the Christian Bible is when Isaiah orders the slaughtering of the prophets of Baal. What happens here is he says to them, okay, you worship these gods, you form them out of gold and wood, call upon them now, tell them to set fire to this bull that we have now drowned in water. and Yahweh sends down a flame to burn this bull, and so thereby Yahweh proves his existence. In the face of the transatlantic slave trade, colonialism and then neo-colonialism, techno-feudalism, genocide and erasure, many African communities have become like the prophets of Baal, screaming into oblivion, no fire coming down to save them. All of human existence and all our evolution advancement is towards the death of God. We think divine interventionism brings us closer to killing this tyrannical idea that enchains us, and this is how we are going to win this debate. Three things in framing. One, what or who is God? As far as we can tell, God is a convenient construction of human ignorance. We made this figure up when we could not explain much of our world. We think that this figure has had a tyrannical hold on humanity since its inception. All of our existence then is towards trying to either prove that this figure exists, which is impossible, or disprove that this figure exists. I'm going to prove to you exactly why divine hiddenness creates that problem. But what is this divine hiddenness? I think Jenny does a very good job to frame it. God remains unseen, elusive, but what that also means is he's inexplicable. And when God is inexplicable, his motivations are flexible. In one moment, God is tyrannical, he slaughters every firstborn in Egypt, and in another moment, he is love. And this happens across all religions. This sort of convenient flip-flopping, depending on the situation, only happens when you don't have barriers that force this God to prove themselves. What happens then with divine intervention? The first thing is the burden is no longer on humanity to affirm the existence of God. The burden is on God to prove themselves. If you are real, send down a flame and burn this damn bull. Otherwise, we will continue and define our own existence for ourselves. You will receive two arguments from me. First, why divine interventionism brings us closer to the death of God. Second, how we are able to reimagine the institutions of God, which are religious institutions. Before that, I'll take note. Who does God answer to? God does not answer to anyone, and that is precisely the problem. Now into my argumentation. First, on why divine interventionism brings us closer to God. Brings us closer to the death of God. First, here we must understand why God must die. One, God must die so we can reimagine how morality is derived. Why are things wrong and right? Presently, all our explanations sort of kind of devolve back to religion. The vast majority of constitutions are based on religion. So it is wrong to be homosexual because somewhere down the line a religious explanation. It is wrong to kill people because somewhere down the line a religious explanation. We think in order for us to internally or intrinsically derive morality for ourselves as humanity, God must die. Secondly, why must God die? In order for us to reinvigorate the search of knowledge. Remember the Enlightenment when people were divorcing themselves from religion? Imagine the amount of knowledge that was uncovered in that short period of time simply because we believe the universe was ours to conquer and not some mystical figure in the sky. Thirdly, God must die so humanity can be self-determining. We think the divine hiddenness, what it does here is it creates a crippling, victim mindset within humanity. We can do so little about our situation because, God wills it. And we think that then necessitates a death of God. Secondly, how does God die? We think God dies when we demand proof. And what is simultaneously happening with us demanding proof is science and technology is slowly giving us a greater ability to explain away these miracles, and we need greater and greater miracles in order for us to be impressed until no miracle can be impressive enough. So the curing of leprosy is simply antibiotics. It's not this Nazarene guy making miracles. We think that greater burden is important for us to be able to self-determine. But let's say that we live in a world where people don't want God to die, and this is into my second argument on how we reimagine constructions or institutions of God so that those that want to keep him alive can continue to keep him alive, but in ways that reduce abuse. Abuse in religious are no longer secretive, no longer private, but you demand an audience for the evidence of God. Pastor can no longer prove to you that God exists or pray for you in the comfort of his bedroom. He must pray for you here, where we will all see the flame of fire come down from heaven. We think that divine intervention demands public performance, it demands an audience, it demands proof. These three things all together reduce the capacity for abuse within these religious institutions. So we think two things as open opposition. The first is that God certainly must die in order for humanity to advance itself. This brings us closer to the death of God because we demand proof of God, but we demand proof of God that supersedes our ability to understand the universe. It's no longer enough to levitate. We know how to do that with science and technology. It's no longer even enough to teleport, maybe, in 20 to 50 years, because our science allows us to do that. God, there's a greater barrier for God to prove themselves to be real. But secondarily, when there's a greater barrier for God to prove himself to be real, abuse can no longer occur as easily in the name of God. We want to see it.
Thank you very much, Leah, for that fine speech. And now I'm going to continue to grab this
Things I can't see. Okay, give me a second to just set up my notes. Okay, everyone can hear me, right? Okay. Somewhere, this must go somewhere. Okay, martial art is very, very short. Doing this for the second time now. Hopefully this time it pans out. I'm very happy that I did both times with people I adore really, really much in my life. First time I was with my really, really good friend, best friend in the whole world. Shout out to you. Yeah, and now I get to do it, the love of my life. I think. And lastly, I just hope that this last speech I'm giving in this space is just always proof to all the kids I've coached, but of kids that want to do this too, that it is proof that you can do it, even outside of these structures that you are locked out of. Even if you're not seen as good, if somebody says you're not the best, you can still do it. I was once one of you, and I'm here now for the second time, and I'm going to beat them again. I'm going to start in 3, 2, 1. When white people allotted the success of slavery towards divine intervention, Black people asked, what did we do? Black people did not say God does not exist. They wanted to create measurements of how they can be good in order to be able to access it. What Rhea is trying to prove about how you accelerate the death of God has to be particularly something that she mechanizes outside emotional rhetoric to show why specifically individuals' intuitive nature of when we can have miracles, because can't defend a world where miracles don't exist. A world where even some sporadic miracles exist, individuals don't want that. That is the conversation that has to happen here. I think she's having an incorrect conversation. I'm going to engage it charitably here because very charitable speaker, right? Even if we're going to talk about Nietzsche, I say, Rhea said it's a surprise, I expected it. Even if you talk about the concept of Nietzsche saying God is dead, when Nietzsche coined it, he said civilization has created its own moral authority, that this is the only way in which we can be able to allot morality. Assuming this is true and is something we can achieve, the issue with this is that even with outside the harms that Rhea speaks about, that society is always going to exist under oppressive structures. Teddy tells you this in the concept of why humanity existence in and of itself is oppressive. But what happens when humanity is able to create its own moral authorship about what things happen, or how things happen, is that individuals that have social capital drive it. So it means on their side, the death of God means white people get to be the God themselves. They get to possess how it exists. It becomes much more harmful because those systems that guide how you access it will always be through the moral authorship of what moral universalism is. This is harmful to how individuals can exist, and specifically for minorities. They say it is good because you can have things like science function and how this is particularly important. Medicine has been particularly harmful to Black women as a science. This is particularly because the information that creates it has always been in the hands of individuals that can define it. That happens specifically because those individuals have been able to create their own form of morality. And this is what the case is in terms of if we're going to take the best case scenario there. But also, this debate is also not that God exists or not, right? Either side has to agree that individuals assume his presence. So one side, God likely exists, but he just simply watches. On one side, God intervenes, so he wants to show himself, but he shows himself sporadically. I'm going to show you by the fact of these proof exists, because of this idea of how he exists, it means that the way in which it exists with this form of interventionism, it's not what Rhea tells you, that it's somehow individuals just seeking for this proof. It's that the proof exists because religious leaders define it. So your pastor gets to tell you that the way in which you can define whether you're getting a miracle or not is dependent on whether you're good or not. But also they can say, oh, well, you woke up today, therefore that is your miracle. Because of those measurements that is always guided by individuals in religious leaders, it means it doesn't accelerate it. The religious leaders and the individuals that have social capital are always going to allot it because they assumed the possession of what the meaning of it is. It becomes much more harmful for these individuals. We think it doesn't work. A couple of things in extension that are going to be important to engage this debate. I'm going to talk to you about a couple of things on how we are able to create a reliance on why this idea of interventionism creates a reliance on divinity in outcome. The problem with the interventionist nature of the interpretation of scripture, it says that it's about how everything in life has to be allotted to a sense of divinity and how we are able to do it. How it has constantly existed is that institutions have been able to possess those miracles and what guidance then look like. So, i.e., churches get to define what access to this form of miracles looks like. So you always have to exist within the church in order for you to gain access to God, right? This means that the form of consciousness itself and how it exists, and for you to define the humanity, it always has to be within the access to institutions that have previously locked you out before. Because the reason that they did that is particularly because the divine or the scripture told them to do so. I'm going to show you why this is also particularly important in how, on the comparative, this is unlikely going to exist. But also, I think the best example in which you can be able to use this and how this interventionism has existed. I think in South Africa specifically, the reason why we have the things like the Day of the Vow is because white people were able to say that the reason why we defeated black people in the war against, we defeated Zulu people, is because God said, yes, you guys deserve to defeat them. Not because you had the guns, and not because the Zulu people did not have the ability to defeat you. That is the type of divinity that you afford to individuals. But what's the problem with allotting divinity to outcomes? It means it's unable to be challenged. You're unable to access any form of challenge to it because divinity is above humanity in and of itself. And this is something that's particularly harmful. Why then does the concept of divine hiddenness allow for this to exist? I'm going to show you why. The flipping of the arguments about the death of God that Area speaks about are much better in the concept of divine hiddenness. But very quickly, I'm going to take a PI from closing.
Yeah, right. Things like love are not tangible, or human beings operate tangibly. How do you get that on your side?
That's the problem. The changeability on your side is always going to be defined by the fact that it has to be divine. So individuals do not have any form of capacity to access that changeability outside of the institutions that interpret what that religion looks like. That's the comparative. Divine hiddenness helps this in a couple of ways. Firstly, that the challenges to systems that Rhea speaks about only exist at the point in time in which the challenge to it exists out of divine allotting. That is to say, for me to be able to question structural nature and how individuals have been oppressed, I need to be able to assume it. I need to be able to see it as something that is not justified and something that cannot be justified. The problem with how structural Lockhart has existed is that the interpretation of scripture by churches has always said, well, capitalism is good and communism is bad. Therefore, if you're a communist, you are going to hell. That form of rhetoric creates a sense of inability to challenge these structures that harm us in the first place. Why does this only exist if we create a sense of divine hiddenness? Because it means that with divine hiddenness, the love of God is everywhere. We don't have to access it through a sense of materiality. You live your life that God is watching you, but for you to access things is not dependent, that it just simply can be sporadic in nature. You yourself are able to exist life outside of the divine intervention itself, but you're able to structurally challenge these things by believing that they're only divine and it's a justification for their existence. That's the reason why we do it.
Thank you, Zuki, for that fine speech. And now let's call the leader of opposition again.
Hi everyone, my name is Sandy, so this is my shout out speech. Firstly, I want to shout out everyone that's here in Sweden. I think this is a phenomenal space, and we all, to some degree, are good people. I especially want to shout out the friends that I've made along the way, for especially very lovely people in the opening path who are my real friends. They didn't remember my name. Most importantly, I do want to express a lot of love for my speaking partner, Leah, continues to be a person that inspires me in this space. And last but not least, I do want to express an even greater degree of love to people who thought I was dead. I'm here, you're not. With that being said, 3, 2, 1. The death of God is the liberation of people in a magnitude of ways. The reason why opening government is going to use this debate is because they shoot themselves in the foot before anything else happens. Let's be clear about a couple of important things. One, the idea of divine hiddenness means or speaks specifically to action. That is to say that God is not actively working to change anything, he's instead an ominous figure. What's important is that God continues to be a moral figure. What this functionally looks like is the Bible is still written the way that it is, and God is still the central figure that acts as the overseer, but he's not actively acting. Why does this become important? Because the vast majority of the analysis that OG wants to give you, that the love is now spread all over, or there isn't going to be a process of justification, simply doesn't ring true as far as reality a lot. Secondly, all of their argumentation functionally responds to itself. The fact that 100 years ago, something like communism would be something that dooms you to death is very different, where in 2026 we can debate and we can have people like Ria who are staunch supporters of communism in the first place. That is because the religious institutions of Christianity necessitate an interventionist structure in how they work. Because of that, we've been able to question it and push it out significantly in the lexicon of how we understand human existence and morality as far as how it should function. More evidence of how interventionism has come to be led to the death of God. I'm going to use probably the most interventionist religion that we do have access to, that being Christianity. Firstly, is a significant decline in theocratic states. What the world looked like 100 years ago, no thank you, was a world where the vast majority of countries were run and determined by religion as far as their government constitution. Our process of consistently re-understanding the world through now mechanizing and understanding and breaking down the very things that constitute God's miracles have functionally led us moving further and further away, and for more and more people to be able to gain comfort and trust in systems outside God itself. But secondly, what that's led to is a genuine drop in people who subscribe to religious structures in and of itself. This is something that we've had that functions as evidential on our side, that our mechanism knows that leads to the death of God itself. But moreover than that, there are a few important things that we need to go over as far as the response to. So, Zuki says some important stuff. The first thing he tells you here is that, for example, our alternative in science is inclusive of medicine that's been harmful to black women. And I completely agree with that. But here's the difference. The people who are the enactors of the harm on black women, as far as medicine goes, are human. That means we're able to create one, greater accountability structures for them. No thank you, because they're not some divine thing that exists beyond power or that possesses logic that supersedes ours. It is a tangible thing that we have the function of humanizing. There's a greater level of redress that happens from there. But secondly, note that the case is entirely uncomparative, right? The vast majority of their analysis suggests that yes, there are existent harms in the framework of interventionism, but they don't explain how those things are unlikely to exist in the absence of interventionism. The extent to which they do this relies on the assumption that God will no longer be a moral actor, which is something we've already proven to be untrue and indeed ourselves. Second thing that they give you here is the idea that religious leaders continue to define what will continue to justify, define, and reframe what miracles look like. The reason why this is also a response that doesn't fly in this debate is because even those redefinitions are things that are losing power because we are using more and more logical means of understanding how the world functions and the world looks. It is the reason why we're able to memify religious leaders in mega churches who use absurdities to justify the religion. We're moving towards a space where there's a greater understanding of how these institutions are meant to function. No thank you. And the next thing that they tell me here is that you're unable to question the framing of miracles because the person who does them is a divine figure, someone who's greater than all of us. So we can't question how these miracles look. What is the alternative? The alternative that they have on their side is that there's absolutely no functional questioning that exists thereof, because you don't know the incentives, you don't know the actions, you don't know the logic that underpins how God thinks and how God works. Even if he's not the actor that implements it, as the figure that supersedes and precedes over an entire moral and religious institution, you're unable to question him even further. So I'll take those.
What does a miracle look like?
A miracle is something that, from my understanding, a creation or a direct action of God or a divine figure that creates a tangible change. That is the functional understanding of a miracle. The process by which it's done is what we change here. We say it's not a God that does it, but it's the human being that is capable and we're able to manufacture great understanding of it. No thank you. A couple of other important things that we need to clarify, because there's something very important that we get told, which is how this is going to facilitate a necessary moral reconstitution. The first very important thing that I think it does is that it humanizes or creates a tangible reflection of what God is and how God can function. The reason why it's important to create that tangible alternative or to facilitate the process of humanization is that now you can critique it or use the tools that are human in understanding it. Why that then becomes important is that you're able to understand the inconsistencies in the framework and you now have a unique ability to opt out of the process of God and the understanding of God. Why is this something that's especially true? No thank you. The reason why this is especially true is we're able to now more than ever have the conversations that the entire bench has been talking about in terms of where was God during slavery as opposed to who else has he been in support of. We're able to assess that the idea that morality, seeing yourself through God's eyes, is something that's simply not true. But the better alternative is to see yourself through your own eyes and the eyes that we've manufactured for ourselves as human beings. Why is this very important? It means that morality is now something that's not centralized to religious figures or central religious institutions. It is decentralized and relative to each person and their own personal understanding of how that morality should look. This is something we think we're significantly better for. But lastly, as far as strategy exists, and this is where we get something wrong, this debate can't be about we're presuming that God exists. We're talking about the dominant narrative here. So whether or not the existence is there is not the conversation we're describing. So we're going to assume it to be true. The conversation is what the vast majority of people believe. The process of believing that this is a God that is insulated and doesn't have in any form of intervention in reality is keeping him as the oppressor and can't stand for that at all.
Thank you very much, Sister, for that fine speech. I'll now have to pull up on Miracle Brown and to advance.
Oh, not Jesus. Okay. All right. Can anyone hear me if I speak like this? Better now? No? Oh. Better now? Yes? Oh, is it off? Oh, okay. Can anyone hear me if I speak like this? A bit louder? This better? Actually, yeah. Good idea. All right, better now? Okay, perfect. All right, a few shout outs. Mine are not going to be like speaking at the end. Firstly, thanks to everyone for being here. Education is a lot more enjoyable and it's far better for here. Second, all the kids, you guys need to make so cool stuff. Please keep staying in the sport, defending the sport. You guys are doing give up on yourself and the sport thing badly. And thirdly, everyone at home, you guys did this. I don't know, whoever watching, ever will watch. You guys did this. So, doing DET, the people in Cape Town, people at UT, all the communities that have updated us here, and everything. Alright, next guys. Starting in 3, 2, 1. If you're confused, I'm also confused. Casey gets an opening opposition is self-defeating. If people say that God is hidden, that means God is closer to being dead than in a world where people want to see his existence. If he's seeing miracles, if he's seeking intervention, if he's seeking guidance, in that world, people are likely to see God as more alive than he is dead. And in that case, I'm confused about where this case is going. I would think we do something quite simple. Number one, who interact with dominant narrative, and number two is the purpose of religion and the interaction with God. I'm going to show you why we both these levels will achieve that better. But before that though, first thing, let's talk strategy and where this thing happens. On their end, they just is not comparison. Because what is the comparison? On their end, the people think that God is there, and therefore we're going to the people who are the be all and end all. But at the same, we have to defend wanting to see that God is alive, that God does miracles. So I'm unsure why when reading it was the be all and end all, we're going to want to see God. In fact, all their analysis proves why our case is true. That people become significantly more independent. People become significantly more liberalized because they say, yes, God does exist, but I'm able to exist in the knowledge that He exists, but I can do a lot more with the knowledge that He exists without having to seek the intervention, seek the miracles, seek all these other things. That is the simple fact that they exist on their end. But secondly, I'm unsure on their end what the delta is. Because on their end, if it is that God, for example, does exist and you have to seek Him, it means on their end you have to defend the fact that people become reliant on the outcome as a means of guaranteeing their existence. Why does it need to be offered on their end? Because it's just proven time and again that those outcomes are true. But there are things that we cannot explain, for example, the existence of pyramids. There are things that we can't directly attribute to because of human size and capability. And for all these reasons, it becomes in fact more true that God does exist, and on their end, they're unable to get the benefits they want to go up on their end. But even the possibility, I'm going to call it three arguments. One, but because of the dominant narrative is, and why divine criticism actually gets it significantly more effectively. But secondly, because of the religion and why the dominant narrative through divine criticism is able to do this far more effectively. What is because of the dominant narrative? Okay, how do people interact with narratives on four bases? One, on expectation, two, on beliefs, three, on practices, four, on values. This is what expectations generally interact with people for. This is an aspect within across the opening part. Why then does divine criticism actually create a better engagement with dominant narrative? One, on expectation. Expectations are significantly less on our side of the house. Three reasons why. Hey, that is the life of the goodness because in your end you know that God exists, but I actually panic to this God to look for a miracle and look for some sort of out from my life. What does this mean? It means that I actually have to deal with the God that I'm dealt with and I have to make life to the fullness that exists on there. That is immediately impactful for people who have been told that they're the problem. They aren't praying enough, they aren't going to church enough, they aren't fasting enough. In our world, we shift the narrative, we shift the responsibility and tell those people that live life to the fullest, make do with what we have, and stop depending on someone who wasn't there 100 years ago, doesn't show up now, and the comparison of all the other people. But secondly, you have less egos. Because for far too long, like people said, it's not my fault, God doesn't love me, it's not my fault, there are all these other reasons. On our way, how to divide religion, people understand that God does exist, we don't understand how He exists, so therefore we can't say that it's His fault or that we don't, He doesn't love us, etc., etc. There are less egos of our side of the house, and people are likely to take more responsibility and do things specifically because they have no other actor to scapegoat to. But finally, there's significantly more openness. You're open to different experiences, open to different expectations, different people, etc. How many comparisons is the comparison bullshit? Does then make it significantly worse? Our expectation, one, you are insecure because all the time you're looking at your life for active confirmation whether God exists or not. If there is a bad thing happening to you and there's no miracle, it means that I'm not living life fully, and therefore you become significantly insecure. You become stressed. Am I doing this right? Am I praying hard enough? Am I going to church enough? Etc. That is really stress when religious psychosis exists because now you can't actively engage other things because you're trying so hard to please someone that you can't understand. But secondly, on beliefs, we significantly better for beliefs on two reasons. One, they're far stronger. Why? On our end, those beliefs are contingent on His word and His word alone. What does this mean? It means that on our end, you don't have to wait for a miracle to happen. You take the word what it is. Shows it hard, yes, but it breeds stronger characters and stronger people. People who are unsuitable to abuse by pastors who are able to twist that word for their own benefit. On the comparison to divine hiddenness, you only focus on what is told to you through divine scripture and that divine interaction. On comparison, they can't do that on their end. What is the comparison on their end? Then you either get flip-floppy people or flip-floppy beliefs. Because on their end, they have to actively try to what's trendy. What's the newest miracle? People telling you to walk from wheelchairs, people telling you, for example, to vomit out snakes, etc., etc. On their end, they have flip-floppy beliefs because people have constantly trying for the thing that exists. Lastly, on practices, how do you get better practices on our end? One, you don't hand it to harming yourself for a greater relationship with God. Why is that the case? Because on our end, you aren't seeking a miracle. On our end, you are directly seeking how to maximize your life. Why don't you need impact life? You like to actively engage in life in a way that is far more meaningful. I am creating better friends. I am having better habits. I am ensuring that you are locking yourself up in your room. Why don't you need impact? Because in your end, On their end, they have to chase a goal that they can never reach. It's a goal that's ever moving, or the goalposts are ever changing. So either you pray enough, either you fast enough, either you go to church enough, either you tithe enough, etc., uncompatible far better to the practices that you live in. But lastly, on values, two things. One, values are significantly more tangible. Why? Because we actually value things like love, like peace, like community, etc. While on their end does not exist. Because on their end, you have to actively cater towards things like giving a miracle, finding something to do something tangible. While our end, these values create better people and better societies more broadly. Hey, because generally there's a greater emphasis on the quality of people that exist there as opposed to the outcomes that exist. So are you a kind person even though you make miracles? On their end, you can be a horrible person, but people kind to you because you're able to create miracles on capacity to significantly get people who are far better. But last on the purpose of religion and how it's good things there. Here, one, you get people that get far greater hope. Why is this the case of our aim to the strong narrative? For reasons. Hey, you don't follow immediate gratification. The problem with religion and the seed of miracles that it doesn't happen now because it doesn't exist now. Therefore, when you anti-religion and anti-everyone that believes in religion, on the comparison on our end, you are far greater to be patient and you're far greater to actually do things to the betterment of yourself. But secondly, you're like able to find better communities for yourself. Why is that the case? Because on our end, you aren't pandering to pastors and people who want to get closer to God, but because on our end, you understand that because God is hidden and can't make himself known as a good life for each other. What is the unique impact on our end of three reasons? A, we are the most vulnerable actor, the actor that wants to live life and find meaning for life. On our end, that actor doesn't have to get to a goal that never gets there. But secondly, on our end, in the long term, we create far better people who aren't floppy, who aren't exploited, very proud to see you.
Thank you very much, everyone, for that fine speech. And now I'm going to put the member of opposition.
Before I start, I hope when I speak like this, before I start, I want to shout out to my partner. I tried to do this time for years, I know it's hard, so it's great. I want to shout out to my former union runs. I want to shout out to Jarvis, who's the coach. I want to thank those digital frustrated that were able to make it. I want to shout out to Maggie, Normal Bird, yeah, I think that's everything. Shout out to these guys, I love them. And someone Three, two, one, go. Someone is coming to save you. We think that is the understanding or the epistemology when it comes to divine intervention. I need to clarify what the true comparative is. Because to be honest, top half and even seizure confusing. But I think this debate is quite simple. Divine hidden means that even when you pray, even when you strive, there's a block, there's a barrier. When Teddy tells you that, oh, the barrier is on our side, that's a lie. Because check the info side. Even those who sincerely pray don't get it. But the second is that the comparative of divine intervention is that you get miracles, you get guidance. So when you pray, when you seek, you find someone's coming to save you. What is the case from side Jozi opposition? I will explain to you the epistemology of miracles. How do you think miracles happen? Two things here. One, they tend to be impossible. They tend to be the situation when you don't expect it at all. But second of all, they are random. Note that miracles aren't contingent on you doing good things. They happen to anyone. You could be the person who was going to church for ages or not even happening to you. Why? It is random. No one can claim the existence or the feeling of knowing it because it only comes from the divineness. Why is this important? Note that the entirety of the opening government case presumes that when you pander to some priest, when you pander to some imam, at some point you're able to get that miracle. But the epistemology of miracles I explained to you isn't contingent on that because miracles happen individually. It happens to you when you are 12. It happens to you with your family. I'll take you later. Why is this important? Because our argument is that given that epistemology of miracles, you're able to self-actualize as an individual. What do I mean here? Rene Descartes says that the only thing that you can trust is the eye. So you can doubt everything else, but you can trust the eye. Not that when you believe in religion, there's a duality of spirituality and the physicality. Not that on their side of the world, there isn't an interaction of that duality. Why? Because you're going to pray to God, but nothing's going to happen. He's not going to come to you. But on our side, He saves you. With that dualistic interaction that happens between the spiritual and the physical is good. Why does it benefit you? Not that human beings are inherently selfish. A miracle preys on that selfishness because you feel special. So the I, as you, feel so special when those miracles happen. Not that this is important. Why? Because even if the world tells us we live in another sad world, you're able to self-actualize knowing that a miracle can happen to me regardless of where I'm at in my life. Why is this important? Because the randomness and the fact that it's not contained in doing some nice thing or some beautiful thing is important. Up until this moment, I want to clarify what I'm trying to explain. One is that miracles are random, they happen to anyone. But most importantly, is that when they happen to you, you self-actualize better. Why? Because there's that interaction between the spiritual world and the physical world. Not that you only believe someone loves you when they do good things for you. It's just hypocritical on their side to say that for some reason you're still going to believe in this stuff when nothing tangible happens to you. We're inherently physical beings. I only love you when you touch me. Like, yeah. The point is here that ultimately you're able to self-actualize because the I is most important. Why is this important? I think this does so much what OG does. Because OG, like I said, presume that this randomness is bad. The randomness is good. Because of that randomness, anyone can access it, anyone can get it before that.
James, you created your own OG case, but most importantly, we're not rejecting religion. We are rejecting seeking confirmation of God in the only way we interpret the distance. Engage.
The problem is, a miracle isn't a confirmation. A miracle is something that happens to you. The debate presumes you're a believer. That is why on their side, to be charitable to them, we have to presume you believe. That is why the people's side says, even when you sincerely pray to Him, you get nothing back because there's a block, because there's a barrier. The second part I want to explain is why we think this is just fundamentally good for you in interacting in your life. Because let's ask ourselves, how do people engage with religion? You engage with it in two ways. One, when you're struggling at work, we live in a capitalistic world, 9 to 5, things go bad. It's just uncertainty. So that's when you interact with religion, when you are curious. And two, you interact with it when you have relationships. Why is this important? People are just fucking difficult. No matter what logic you get, you could not get out of that specific thing. This is important because the alternative on their side is that we can sit and wait for a miracle. And not, waiting is not bad because we always do it in our lives. We do it when we are trying to make money. We do it when we're in education for 10 to 15 years before we can get anything. So waiting and sitting, that cognitive dissonance of waiting is something which is fundamentally easy because we're indoctrinated and we always reach our life. I'm not going to take it. Why is this important? Because not that, the info slide also says that you get guidance. What does this guidance look like? Not that it can happen through people, it can happen through signs that you get when you're seated there and you seem to get an idea. This is important because ultimately you have guidance in the type of decisions that you make. Molemo says you make better decisions, but you can't make better decisions if you pray and you get nothing back. Not that on our side you can pray and you get something. Even if we will come and say it doesn't happen now, it is bound to happen because there's that intervention, there's a divine intervention, and it's always in my hands. But before that, it was nothing.
You say that miracles are random, but somehow all these are going to happen physically.
Yeah, but like, yeah, random. Like, it's going to happen. If they don't happen now, it's going to happen at some point. There's a something. Randomness just means the time at which it happens, not specifically the thing happening. I want to explain why the impact of making better decisions is just better. Not that you are much more confident in the decisions you make when you believe in divine intervention. Why? Because at some point in time, you're going to get a miracle. At some point in time, you're getting guidance. Guidance to what? The people you interact with, the fellow believers. Because no, it's just hypocritical to believe that a miracle is contingent when you pray to a specific person. No, it is that personal interaction you have when you go back and you kneel down and you pray. But it's that personal interaction when you're asking for a Hail Mary in that specific moment. We think that's important. What have we done as closing opposition? I think it's quite simple. We say that when you believe in divine intervention, it benefits you how? One, you self-actualize much better. Because you feel special, you feel taken care of, you feel like someone is going to come and save you. The comparative is no one says you don't feel special, you tap into that innateness individuals have. But the second thing is you just make better decisions in your relationships. Why? Because you know someone's going to guide you, you know someone's going to care for you. We think that's much better. Why? We live in this bad world where bad things are going to happen. We don't say that because miracles are going to happen, bad things are not going to happen to you. Because sometimes God lets those bad things happen to you. Why is this important? Because ultimately, closing opposition, we stand for the eye, but we also stand when we make better decisions. Because someone is going to come and save you.
And now that from government, some of the government speech.
Is this all you find? Before that, a couple of shout outs. Shout out to everyone here mostly. You guys are also nice and super cool. Especially the minors, they're like my also special shout out to Daniel and here. You guys are the goats, you guys are so special, so deserving, so smart, so kind, etc. etc. Lastly, I want to shout out to my partner. He's like the smartest guy on earth. Like, can you imagine taking a high schooler who didn't break a school match to the final of Jozi? And you know, maybe I don't understand why you break at school nationals. That's not the right. But an answer that I do have is that my coach is the smartest guy ever, and that's the most important. Okay? Ready to start in 3, 2, 1. The delta of this debate happened when we engaged with a dominant narrative that was portrayed towards religious people, individuals who were wanting to opt into religion and believe in a God. Why is this important? Because it pretty much frames out the whole of this opening opposition team. Why? Because individuals who actively believe in a God mean that they're going to wait for the dominant narrative to be true for them. They're going to desperately wait for a miracle to come true because they are religious individuals and so they believe in God. Why is this important? Because anything that could vaguely be a miracle will be a miracle for them because they're desperately waiting for it to happen. What does this mean? It brings up their argumentation about how people become unimpressed with God because in fact they take lower standards because they're desperately waiting for any semblance of a miracle to happen. But secondly, it means that God will not die so that we can reimagine him. It means that we reimagine him to do less and less for us because we constantly wait for a small semblance of a narrative. On this side of the house, God doesn't die, God does less and less for individuals. Individuals lose hope, individuals lose their engagement with religion. Notably, religious individuals believe in God because if there one semblance of things like community, everything that Olego told you that went unresponded to. Secondly, on closing opposition, their case is entirely an hyping of opening opposition. Because it is either true that God doesn't exist and God doesn't do any of those narratives, or it is true that it is either true that God doesn't exist, or it is true that God will save you and come and save you. But secondly, they have their own speech because it is either true that someone will come and save you, or someone will come and save you randomly. Why is this? Because it is probably true that certain individuals will not get miracles given the fact that it's random. That means that it's given to certain individuals and not to others. Why is this specifically important though? Because individuals who aren't religious aren't individuals waiting for miracles. So it is not that every individual can access miracles, it is rather that religious individuals, on which is the delta of the debate, cannot engage with miracles at a point at which they are random. Because there is nothing you can do more to get a miracle than you can do less to get a miracle, given the fact that it's random. So we think that at the point in which you are constantly desperately waiting for God to confirm that you are a good, religious person, then we think that individuals are not going to feel saved by God, but rather hated by God because they're not doing enough or they're not engaging with where that should be. I'll read more on the closing opposition case that we opening opposition is a bit confused. Secondly, their case is pretty much self-defeating because they say that miracles are random, but at the same rate they say that they value individuals praying for miracles. So we think it is either true that individuals randomly engage with religion until a random miracle comes, or it is true that the dominant narrative is that God will save you through a miracle, and so individuals stay praying constantly for that randomness to come. But fourthly, this is a government case. Because on our side of the house, when religion is hidden, we think that you will not wait for the random, or rather it is still random because you don't know the way that God is going to engage with your prayer. Why is it different or better on our side of the house? Because on our side of the house, you do not sit around and wait. You believe or you hope that God has your best interest, given the fact that you cannot see the way that He's manifesting it, and so you make infinite or instant saving of that, given the fact that you make immediate consolation because you know that He exists and so you believe that He has your back, as opposed to waiting for a random miracle that might never come or might take very long to come, and so you need on yourself forever. On opening opposition, a couple of things here then. Firstly, the debate is again not about whether or not God should exist or whether or not people should believe in religion. The debate centers around individuals who already believe in religion and what they should then opt into or believe that opt into. So what does this mean? It means that we should either believe that religion should be something that individuals believe is guided by God, or it's true that individuals should live their lives and do things in good interest and good faith and know that God is behind and watching and doing all of those things. It is true that God is always watching in this instance, but the difference is that you as an individual have to make good choices and do good things for good things to happen, as opposed to randomly waiting for something good to happen. We don't think God guides in this instance. Particularly, their case only works if miracles don't happen in status quo. Notably, I think a couple of weeks, years ago, it was like that child that did 3 miracles and they made him a saint. That child didn't do anything, he was super young. That's it. But on this side of the house, individuals believe. Sorry. Individuals. Does anyone have water? Thanks. Individuals believe on their side of the house that miracles happen to the most random of people and not the individuals who do good things. Why is this important? Religious individuals on their side of the house have no incentive to care about the things that they're doing, given the fact that miracles can happen to random people. But in their case, you only work in the case where a miracle doesn't happen. Given the fact that on their side of the house, individuals are desperate and waiting for miracles to happen, it's probably not true. But then, their case is self-defeating as well. It is even true, or rather, on our side of the house, if God must die, it is probably true that God should die in a world where God stays hidden, where there's no chance for things like miracles to happen, there's no chance to bring people back into the haunts and terror and all of the rhetoric of religion. Why is this important? Because we're able to co-opt all of their benefits, the entire opposing bench, given that A, on our side of the house, when God is hidden and we cannot see the explicit things that He's doing, then it is probably true that God is likely to die. But B, if it is true that you need random help and access to God, it should be random help that you don't know when it's happening, because of that means that you're getting immediate consolation you think that you're doing. Why is it more exclusive topics? Firstly, they don't engage with the specificity of emotion, i.e., they also don't engage with specifically religious individuals, but they don't engage with what the dominant narrative looks like. Secondly, they're more uncomparative, given the fact that they only talk about the harms of interventionism. Well, give you 15 arguments as to why our side is better. That A, you don't constantly seek consolidation or consolation from other individuals. B, that you're not always insecure because you're not constantly waiting for God to get there. But C, that you seek maximization of life. This was debate winning. Because on our side of the house, we engage with the most vulnerable act in the debate. Religious individuals were seeking to be religious and seeking consolation in God. Individuals then don't sit and wait for miracles, don't pray extra, don't fast extra, but rather they live their life to the fullest through things like love, through things like kindness, through things like better engagement, and that means that these are the individuals who are likely to succeed. This is analogous to how you probably don't do bad things in tournaments and then win. So, for example, you probably don't cheat and then lose. We can Avenue team proud to perform.
Thank you very much, Dana, for that fine speech. I'll now have to call the opposition view to come and wrap up today's grand final.
Before I begin my speech, oh my gosh, I just obviously, firstly, I want to thank you. This is actually our first time ever since we together at a tournament and being together. But thank you again for the creative and detail of this tournament. It was really appreciated. Shout out to my friends that came with me, the BCP, Ria, John, Nancy. Love you guys so much. Love that to go. I just also want to thank everyone here for contributing to my experience. Like, I just love the debating community and something that is very, I think, yeah, something very unique to each of us. And my finalists, it's such an honor to be out here with you guys. Sometimes you just watch the race, it's just like you think, how can I ever reach that level of being at finals? And then you're up here, so maybe it's a little bit of motivation. So thank you guys so much. How did you shout out my parents? Okay. I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Way of me as CEO within this specific way. A few things. First, we tell you that we actually present the comparative willingness to pray. Firstly, we tell you it is either you pray and you get nothing, and on the other side, you pray and there's a miracle which waits for you that something is going to happen at a random point in time. When we talk about the randomness, we tell you that it's something that happens at an individualistic level. This is something that you wait for just one day, and sometimes it is a waiting journey that actually you learn something and you get a miracle from that. Secondly, we tell you when it comes to the framing, James comes and tells you that people are tangible. We want to bridge the gap between individuals and God. You cannot bridge that gap if you don't have any sort of intervention in place. But like I've already said, when we talk about the randomness, it kind of like presumes that randomness is bad on their side. We tell you it's relative to the person personally, and we tell you the impact that you receive from that is a waiting journey in which you gain something from it. That's why when we tell you we play against opening opposition, we talk about the existence, we tell you as CEO that we actually ground the existence of it and how it relates to the people on the ground. Now firstly, I'll be going on to my rebuttal. First I'll be tackling OG, and I'll be tackling CG, and then obviously why we're against OO and why we're in this debate. Firstly, a few things that they have mentioned within this debate on OG side. First, they talk about the idea of structural barriers, right? The idea that good things are due to the fact of the idea of God. But your responses. First, we tell you to have these barriers that exist. You try and, it actually works on their side because of the fact you're trying to interact with something and there is nothing that you gain from it. You're talking to a wall in its own sense. So when it comes to the idea that you have some sort of intervention in place that reminds you that God exists, we tell you that you break that barrier. So the God for themselves is what James talks about with individuality. You end up looking after yourself. When you don't have a community that relates to the idea that miracles will come, and you don't have a community that tells you that something is going to come for us, the communities end up separating because of the idea that there are different interpretations. But secondly, we tell you that when it comes to the idea of miracles, they tell us like in such a way that makes it presume that miracles are like predetermined based on your character and the institution that you are from. Your response to this. One, we tell you, of course, intervention is at an individualistic level, but secondly, we tell you we flip this and tell you that exploitation is worse on their side. Why is this true? Because it's a fact of the idea that because when you don't have a specific figure that helps you intervene within your personal life, we tell you that you'll fall for things that don't guide you. On their side, people end up believing the world that other individuals present to them because of the fact that there's no interconnectedness between like the actual religion and the people within it. As a result, and people and like to use the example of like white people coming to tell black people about what God is, when you don't have an intervention and a community that helps you believe that God is going to help you out of those situations, you allow those very people to exploit you and like oppress you in those very same systems. So what ends up happening is when you're in a just desperate situation and you kneel down, but no intervention is going like when you like receive no like set of answer, we tell you this is bad because you end up submitting to the system that actually oppresses you. Why? Because there's no intervention. God is not going to come and save you. And so, what is the point of being here? But before I continue opening,
Another round of no opting responding to my type. This debate is about the dominant norm of access to God in interpretation. Miracles happen on both sides. The difference is that here you don't use that to confirm its existence. You have to wait.
when you don't believe that God is going to intervene at some point in your life, you become complacent to the idea that the very system that you opt into is something that just doesn't exist. James already tells you when you are stuck in a capitalistic system, a 9 to 5, where you believe that no one is going to end up coming to help you, you become complicit in that because why would God come and like interject into your life when you actually believe that there's an intervention in place and your life will get better? You think that just doesn't make sense. So on the comparative here, when we talk about the idea, when James talks about the idea of self-actualization, we tell you that because that duality exists and there's an actual interconnectedness that falls during like your time of being in that religion, and you have the idea that miracles are going to come, is that duality that exists and gives you some sort of hope. But moving on now, I'll be tackling CG. I'll get to your point. First, they talk about this idea that this dependency, and just you end up using like these miracles as like a scapegoat. Two responses to this. One, what ends up happening on their side in like the long run is that, like I said, you create your own interpretation instead of believing the idea that God is going to guide you within the community, like I've already said. What ends up happening is that on the counterfactual is that people are able to exploit you a lot more because of the fact that you feel like very dependent on the idea of miracles, but there's a community there that helps guide you and helps better your standard of living. But secondly, we also tell you that it takes away to preserve within those specific situations. Why is this important? Because of the idea that every single resistance that has ever happened throughout history was driven by the purpose that God is going to help and save them, that God is going to intervene within their situation. When you have that belief, you are able to persevere throughout the difficulties that you experience in life. When you don't believe that someone is going to come and end up helping you in those situations, you just lose hope. You don't want to persevere. You end up thinking maybe it's like no point in me fighting and doing anything because God is not going to come and end up giving me a miracle at some point in time. We think that is a bad thing. Like I've said, the idea of hope, they said that we end up being patient for those decisions, but you actually end up being patient when you have the idea that an intervention is going to come into play and actually help you in the long term. Like I've already tackled the idea of waiting, we tell you that when it comes to waiting, people are used to the idea of waiting on intervention. We wait to go to a debate tournament, we wait to go on a trip to another country. People are used to the idea of waiting because they have the idea that something is going to happen at the end of the day. When you don't have that waiting period that exists, whether it's you this idea of miracles, and then you don't have that idea of miracle is going to come, it ends up not benefiting you in the long run. So why do we win this debate? We tell you that we ground this in the idea of how it connects people on a surface level and how you actually self-actualize yourself and make it to decisions. In the end of the day, that's what it goes.